MGen, your insurance details are instantly uploaded to the RATSA system, enabling you to buy road tax immediately. Madison General Insurance Company Zambia Limited, your award-winning digital insurance provider. Avoid unnecessary movements. Buy insurance online.
MGen, it's worth it.
Costa is brought to you by FQM Trident Limited, a subsidiary of First Quantum Minerals Limited.
This week on Costa, we feature a politician who hailed from Mporokoso, grew up in Lusaka, excelled in his academics to become a successful businessman and lawyer, and later in his life, probably when he was at the University of Zambia, his liking for politics was birthed. Tonight, we profile Mporokoso Member of Parliament Brian Muntayalwa Mundubile, among others aspiring for the presidency of the Patriotic Front.
Well, Brian Mundubile was born in Mporokoso, at Moombo village, back in 1971, on the 5th of January. Born from a freedom fighter and politician, the late John Chilamba Mundubile, and mother Nora Chiluya Mundubile. I was born in a family of 26, so it's a very big family, and united family at that. Yes, as a little child, I started my school in Solwezi, as a matter of fact, where my father worked. At that time, as a regional secretary. Later went to Zambezi, and I was at Zambezi Primary School before going to Mporokoso. Yeah, so continued my primary education there for another 2 years before I came to Lusaka, to live with my sister. I attended school at Olympia Primary School, and in grade 7 I went to a school in Chilenje called Timothy Mwanakatwe, and went to Kamwala Secondary School between 1986 and 1990, after which I went to the University of Zambia. Then after University of Zambia, I went to ZICAS to do accounting SCCA. Well, of course, after which I went into business for some time. I think the business journey was over 20 years.
26 of you, which means 25 siblings from one father, one mother?
No, there are three mothers involved.
Okay.
My father had 3 wives. Yeah, so with that number of children. Interestingly, you would not even know. We don't even identify ourselves according to which mother we came from. Even when we still have one mother still alive, even when all the 3 were alive, and they took turns to visit us. So if you had not met the other mother, this is the only mother you'd meet, and I'll simply say, meet my mother. That's how Dad designed it. He kept that discipline within us. Yeah, even now, of course, maybe for the sake of the interview, we'd go to that detail. We hardly go there, If the number was not alarming, maybe we would not even have gotten to know about the other 2 mothers. Yeah, so a political family. My father was quite a strong politician. Served in various capacities in UNIP. So as a child, I lived in Kaputa before. I lived in Mporokoso before. I lived in Chavuma. I lived in Zambezi. I lived in Solwezi. We're all over. At that time, it was such that those politicians were transferred maybe after every year or two maximum. And you could tell from the areas we went to. I started my school in Solwezi, later went to Zambezi, because at that time my father was covering both Zambezi and Chavuma. Yeah, and this is how I think President Kaunda kept the One Zambia, One Nation slogan going, or the motto, because clearly growing up, we didn't identify ourselves as coming from Mporokoso. My name was simply Brian Mundubile. The next person was Levi Kambita or something, and that's how there was Limande, or this is Dilamono. Yeah, so that's what I remember, and that's what my childhood was like. And I think that in adulthood has helped me a lot to understand the different cultures of how people live and how people lived, such that even in my later life, in my business career, I've done business in Western Province. You'd be interested to know that some 23 years ago, I set up a timber factory in Kaoma. So I was operating between Kaoma and Mongo. I also set up a factory in Lukulu. So in those areas, the name Mundubile is not strange. If you went to the chiefs, sometimes I would even joke with the people there that I'm now eligible to become a headman, because Mundubile was a household name in that area. One value that will come out very clearly, maybe arising from that, is that I'm very comfortable around people, and I always want to get people involved in whatever is happening. In short, I'm a team player. I also believe in unity. And I think the most important value is that because of family dynamics, those that are close to me will tell you, I quickly move in when I see either friends differing, or indeed myself. If there's something between myself and the next person, I would want it resolved, because that is how my father brought us up. Remember that you have this very big family, and sometimes there may be differences within ourselves as siblings. So we learned to resolve differences and coexist and live together, even with certain differences. So unity in diversity is something that I embrace very well. Well, of course, the area of finance, being an accountant myself, area of law, I'm not only a lawyer, of course, I'm an advocate of the High Court of Zambia. I'm also a drafter, a qualified drafter, and now soon graduating with a master's in constitutional law. Yeah, so what I have done most of my life is actually business. I founded a number of businesses, starting with very small businesses, and of course growing along the way. Yeah, so in terms of competences, what I bring to the table, management skills, through training and indeed practice. I have run construction companies before. I have done exports in wood and agricultural products for some time. I did a lot of transportation locally and internationally. Yeah, so in terms of skills, I think I come with very wide experience. You can imagine that starting from finance, coming all the way to law, going into international business, because I have been able to do business both locally and internationally. Before I got into mainstream politics, actually I struggled to do that because I had to think about having to give up all that. Yeah, I did a lot of travel outside, for business. Yeah, so I come to the table with a lot of experience, understanding international business, understanding local business, and of course the law at the heart of it. So in terms of exposure, I believe I've got what it takes. I also served in positions like I chaired the Energy Regulation Board before I became an MP. I served on the Zambia Development Agency Board for about 5 years, way before I became an MP, and many other private boards. Yeah, so in the private sector, I think that's where I've been for much longer than I've been in public sector. I must tell you that there's a huge difference. I went into business for some time. I think the business journey was over 20 years. I did a lot of all manner of business, if you like, name it, transports. We did general trading, fertilizers and grain. We did pharmaceutical. So basically, as a young man, I was very active in business. I had chosen that path, soon after school and college. I always had this dream. I had a dream of becoming a businessman. Maybe because of some background, you would be interested to know that whilst living with my sister, we lived in a neighborhood where we had very strong businessmen at the time, that is Sunningdale. I had a few names that I could point to, like Kavindeles, the Lishomwas, very big names there. And of course, I was interested to know what their backgrounds were. These were businessmen. My late sister would always laugh at me and say, "What is it with you in business?" So when I had an opportunity to do small businesses, I started building up from there. And of course, at some point, we're fortunate enough to grow our businesses to what would have been some meaningful business within the sector, and settled on construction. I come from a political family, so to speak, because my father was a politician. You may be interested to know that he actually stood for the Mporokoso seat twice, but did not make it. And he always told us that he would be very happy if any of us became an MP from Mporokoso before he died. With me, I'd taken a business route, but I had a younger brother who immediately became a politician soon after he completed his grade 12. And because he lived with my father in Mporokoso, he had a chance to learn his politics from my father. He's still alive now, my younger brother, an astute politician. He actually taught me politics. He was a constituency chairman under MMD for 15 years. He was actually the mayor of Mporokoso for also 15 years. Yeah, so that is the politician my father groomed. Because I lived away from my parents, I was not fortunate to learn all the antiques in politics. But of course, seeing your father do things, naturally you're influenced or persuaded by his actions, especially towards servitude. It's something that we saw our father do. Sometimes he would want to go and resolve problems outside when there were problems in the house. I mean, for instance, he could take money from the house, maybe to go and pay for somebody else's problem, and the mom would be there. How can you do that? So it's something that we saw. It's something that we grew up with. Yeah. Now, going back, I remember it was, I think, sometime in 1996. My brother-in-law was very good friends with one politician called Remy Kavandamshota. One evening he called me and he said, "Brian, we are going for a convention, the MMD convention." That was in 1996. And, you know, I know that you're with your friends at the University of Zambia during this vacation there. I would want you to campaign for me. Okay, can you mobilize students so that you campaign for me? So I was appointed campaign manager, you know. So I went to the university that evening, and there were a few friends who were still there. Of course, maybe some will be embarrassed, but I'll mention their names. For instance, the former CEO for RDA, Kanyuka Mumba, my business partner now, Akabundo Munalula. We had people like Malaya and many others. So I went to them and I said, gentlemen, Remy Mushota wants us to be his campaign team. So they were all very excited, first of all, just to be in the same space, you know, with this refined gentleman, a minister of foreign affairs, legal affairs, Remy Mushota. It was a privilege. So we all looked forward to it the following day. So he came and he asked me to introduce him. So we immediately engaged, and for the next 3 days, we went on campaigning for him alongside other. So it was very interesting, you know, to be in that very busy environment. And at the end, he actually stood for 2 positions at the convention, Chairman Legal and Chairman Foreign Affairs. And he scooped both, you know. And I think from there I began to get interested in politics. Because at that convention, we interacted even with the late President, Michael Sata. That's the time he was going for position of National Secretary. He had given us some assignment one evening, you know, to campaign for Mr. Chikamba, Mr. Dr. Kawimbe, and remember the late Stalin Sampa, Chitalu Sampa. He had a political gimmick, so he brought in other people to stand against him, and they later withdrew to support him. So he had given us that assignment to, you know, to campaign for them. So I think from there, I began to find politics very interesting, to a point that a few years from there, I still had some little business running within the university, so I would be there. I would assist students campaign for UNZASU presidency. Okay, if you talk to Emmanuel Tembo, he will tell you the story. Mourinho, Antonio Mwanza will tell you the story. So at a very low level, I began to manage student politics. You know, you can imagine that I had a shop within the university, you know, a very busy shop. So I would still go back there and mingle with students. So I would give support, for instance, to campaigners. Okay, this is our candidate, and this is the one that we are supporting, and maybe sponsor a team to campaign for that student. Yeah. So of course, away from there, I became fairly active in community service within Mporokoso. I'll be honest with you, at that time I made it a point that I will remain a businessman, but I'll support politics, just from the business background. Especially that through my brother, we had occasion to mingle with people like Benjamin B.Y. Ilunga Mwila. That was his very good friend. We did a few hunting trips together. And I always thought, okay, if I can become a businessman like this man. So politics, yes, but I should not go in. You know, I should sponsor politicians. I should remain in business. That was really what my idea was. That was my motto. Well, my style of politics may be a bit different from what people are used to. But I think I get work done. Most important thing is that I get work done. You see, it's very tempting sometimes when you're in a leadership position to be seen as the only one, as the Alpha and the Omega. You do everything. Sometimes I simply do the thinking, and I find the best implementer. I'll give an example. Being chief whip, being leader of opposition, you need to study, you need to know your team. What are the strengths of individual MPs? Otherwise, yes, you can be so strong as an individual and go all the way, but it's just a one-man show. How different are you from a party with maybe only 3 MPs or 4 MPs? What I try to do as much as possible is to get everybody involved. So there's a lot of interaction in the background. Sometimes I can have a very good debate and I'll pass it on to the next person. Not because I can't do it myself, but can we also get other strong people? Imagine the outlook. If we had 25 very strong MPs and debaters, that actually depicts the size of our party. But we can have 3 very strong debaters, you know what I mean? It doesn't really help, as it were, because if 1 or 2 are not there, then the party goes to sleep. Yeah, so yes, I may have started off as a background politician, sort of, but I'm here. I'm out there in the open. Yes, I might not be as vocal, but like I said, I get work done, and I feel that's the reason why I've been entrusted with certain positions. You know that I served as member of Central Committee. I'm still serving as member of Central Committee for the past 6 years. I chaired the Legal Committee for 5 years. I've chaired a number of other committees within the party. And the reason is simple. I have that stamina. I have that influence, to be able to bring people together, to see a common vision and to begin to work together. Because by nature, I'm able to relate. And by nature, I'm able to communicate such that along the way, even if it's in a very soft tone, somebody's able, or people are able to appreciate what I'm putting across. And they're able to also see where we are going. So like I said, even with this approach, I believe that I get work done. Even going ahead for the job of presidency, the politics have evolved. The politics of yesterday and politics of today are completely different. Take for instance, just 11 years ago when PF came into power, the people that were voting in last year's election were only 7 or 8 years old. So if you went back to the time MMD got into power, most of the voters were not even born. So you would realize that if you import a manner of politics from that far back, the new voter may not even understand you. The new voter is more current. They want to understand issues. They want you to articulate issues. We have, for instance, the UPND in government today. There's a way they're governing, of course. So many things could be wrong, but there are certain things they may be doing differently, which maybe a current voter may be appreciating. And that becomes a starting point. That is why I say that the politics of yesterday and the politics of today are totally different. So you need to understand the dynamics. Who is a voter today? What do they want to see? I'll give you an example. A typical voter who's a youth, a graduate, and unemployed is only looking for one message. You need to convince him that if you're given an opportunity to govern, you are going to improve the economy, and bring about job creation so that they can get an opportunity to be employed going forward. And this is not a promise in the air. You've got to explain how you're going to do it. Okay? Back in the day, you just went and said, I'll bring boreholes, I'll create jobs, and everybody bought into it. But today's voter is one who says, but how are you going to do it? When the current government say the same thing and they're unable to do it. So that's where I make a difference, because I'm able to go that far to explain my vision to the detail.
Obviously, inter-party politics as well as national politics will vary. Brian's campaign looks at him taking over the reins of the Patriotic Front when the party goes for a convention in March 2023. Mundubile is mostly speaking to the membership of the party to look at restructuring the PF in terms of grassroots, the structures, and so on. But after coming out of a huge defeat in 2021, does Brian Mundubile agree that the PF party is somewhat divided because those who suffered defeat, the old members, are calling for the rebranding, while others are jumping ship? The party is in a bit of disarray. Besides, if we look at history, UNIP suffered defeat in 1991 and they never came back. The MMD in 2011 suffered defeat and the party has completely decimated and currently doesn't even have a single member of parliament. How will Brian Mundubile rebrand the PF to be an attractive party for the new crop of voters, but also to keep the aspirations of the old members alive?
Maybe the starting point, we go back to the UNIP times. UNIP lost elections 1991 and never to rise. What could be the reasons? Because I've seen there's been a lot of comparison between UNIP, MMD, and now PF. So I thought I could just, say something about that. UNIP came in, MMD came in with multi-party politics. Those of us that were there, the wind was totally different now. We felt free. We had the freedom, and we began to participate in politics. So clearly, the complexion of politics had changed completely from what it was under UNIP. So it was very difficult, for people to look back and think about one party, a state under UNIP and so on. So that's how MMD went on for another 20 years. When PF took over power, PF came in very strong, with a strong message on pro-poor policies, where President Sata was on this trajectory to open up the country through infrastructure development. And for sure, the first 1 year into government, the entire country was a construction site, meaning that from where MMD had ended and what PF had begun to do in the next 3 years before President Sata died, it became very difficult for the opposition, MMD then, to come up with any strong message against the PF because they were performing, and they had promised so many things to the poor, and they had begun to implement most of the things that they had promised. So that is the reason why it became very difficult for the MMD to emerge. Of course, compared to the situation currently, we may not be comparing oranges with oranges. Maybe we're comparing apples to oranges. It's been a year now since our friends took over power. You must understand, one of the major reasons why Zambians voted against us was because of cadreism and violence. And we admit that. Personally, I've taken it upon myself to apologize to the Zambian people unreservedly that, yes, we started as a pro-poor party. We lost the plot along the way. And now that you've reminded us of what our responsibilities were, I come back on behalf of the party to apologize and also to make an undertaking that, given a chance, we will ensure that cadreism does not come back to our party. Now, if you see what is happening now, cadreism under UPND is still there. In the by-elections, people are beaten every day. What is even worse is that at that time, cadreism was predominantly in bus stations and markets. But now you have it even in institutions. You've got state institutions with cadres displaying cadreism in those institutions. Secondly, when you look at the plight of an average Zambian, the poverty levels in this country in some areas are over 70%. At national averages around 56 to 60%. Now, if you look at the way government, the current government, the UPND government, has gone about managing the affairs of the country insofar as the poor or the interests of poor are concerned, talk about farming, for instance. Talk about just the economy, say on the copper belt. You're talking about miners and the rest of them. This government has been paying a lot of attention, to the elite, the rich, the mining houses, and very little attention has been paid to the plight of the poor. Then that's where, for us as the pro-poor party, we get an opportunity to go back to the people, because now they can see the difference. They saw to what extent the PF government would go to try and uplift the living standards of our people, be it in infrastructure, be it in social protection, as it were. But the current government, would rather give concessions, for instance, to mining houses within 2 months of coming into power. God knows when they did their research, when they did their regulatory impact assessments, but within 2 months they're able to do that. And yet, 10 months later within the year, they are unable to procure fertilizers for the poor people. They are unable to supply drugs in hospitals where the poor people go. So when you look at the PF now, in my view, we talked about violence and we've said sorry to the Zambian people. If you were to look at our party on the 12th, 13th and 15th of August 2021, and you look at where it is now, we believe the party is stronger now than it was maybe a week before elections and a week after elections. Yeah, because now I think people are able to compare. They're able to compare how PF governed the affairs of this country compared to the current government. When you talk about rebranding, I've been very careful in saying, one, we've gone back to the people to tender an apology, especially on violence and cadreism. Now, we are rebranding, meaning we are changing the complexion of the party. We are also changing the players, as it were. That is the reason why I said, even as we go to the convention, we are saying to the Zambian people, away from the structures, first of all, can you please give us a signal? Who do you think amongst us will be the best agent for rebranding as a starting point? Yeah. Remember, we are trying to get the party accepted again. So in that journey, we can't walk alone. We have to work with the people. So we're asking the people, can you help us choose an agent for rebranding? Then secondly, you talk about the party with a tag of corruption, as it were. Yeah, we are saying to the Zambian people, to say the party was corrupt may not be correct. Yeah, whilst it is true that there may have been individuals within the party that engaged in corrupt activities, the party itself, in its manifesto and in its constitution, abhors corruption, detests corruption, speaks against corruption. So it's 1 year down the line. All the members of the party were also very interested. We're very interested to see these individuals and what corrupt activities they were involved in. There is yet to be a single conviction of any of our members in a case involving corruption. You may also be interested to know that most of our members, unless I'm yet to be reminded whether there's a single member, former minister, former permanent secretary, facing any charges of corruption before the courts. What we are seeing, most of them are there appearing for this law that is being abused, found in possession of proceeds, of suspected proceeds of crime. Yeah, so the tag of corruption, of course, is something that our friends the EPND used very, very vigorously. But we're waiting to see. There may be 1 or 2 individuals that are found wanting. But honestly, is that representative of the party membership? So that corruption tag, yes, but it should not be clothed on the party. It can be clothed on individuals that belong to the party. Just like the UPND now. Will it be fair for us to call it corrupt, because as we talk today, we know some individuals who may be involved in some corrupt activities. So why don't we call out those individuals who belong to the EPND rather than calling the entire party corrupt? The PF is a very clean party. It's a clean party in that if you go to the constitution, our party constitution, as a matter of fact, talks against corruption. It abhors corruption and advises against any corrupt activities, because it's a pro-poor party. And even as we talk about corruption, I want us to look at corruption even in a broader sense. We in the PF looked at corruption even in a broader sense. Many people have tried to trivialize it and maybe look at it in a much narrower sense. If you look at the concept of, if you look at corruption, you must look at it in a wider concept. It's not a mere taking or giving of bribes. Okay? You see, it involves the putting of private interest over public interest. Okay? In relation to policy, legislation, and administration. This is very, very important, because many a time we've trivialized the topic around corruption to believe the policeman at a roadblock puts a 20 kwacha in a hat is corrupt. One guy says, "Mpase ko something I'll push." We have to go broader. You should know that today we may be sitting with bigger corruption cases that will actually have a bigger impact on the lives of our people than what we've been talking about. If you look at how I've defined corruption, it to say, it should involve those that put private interest over public interest in relation to policy, legislation, and administration. I'll give you an example. It's possible if I'm Minister of Finance today, okay? I'm sitting as the Minister of Finance in charge of policy. I can come up with concessions if you like. I can give mining concessions up to 5 billion kwacha. Tell the mines that I'm removing this or I'm allowing this concession. And as a result of that policy, the mining houses save 5 billion kwacha. And maybe in the end, I receive money out of it because I've saved the money. They received money out of it. What have I done? What I have done is to put private interest over and above public interest, because the Treasury is losing 5 billion. Maybe I'm getting 20 million. Maybe I'm getting 30 million. So you see, when rulers, concern themselves with profit, business and profit, over common interest, politics ceases to be a public vocation. It now becomes a trade where campaign promises are sold in exchange for a vote, so that one acquires influence, which influence he uses in turn to acquire private interest over public interest. To the best of my knowledge, I do not have any skeletons in my closet. I've had to ask myself this question over and over. And, I've come to a position that I'm ready to take up this very important office, because I've taken a personal audit of what my activities have been whilst in public office and also private office. I believe I have led my life fairly well, upholding morals, both in society and outside. And while serving in government, I think I made sure that I conducted myself and activities above board. So to the best of my knowledge, I do not think I have any skeletons in my closet. Well, firstly, I've been in business close to 30 years, and I mentioned how we started, and so along the way, I think we grew our business way before I got into politics, and we made sure that they run professionally. Even when I was in government, I tried by all means to ensure that the businesses that I'm involved with continue to run professionally without my influence at all. So it's from that background that I believe it will be very difficult, for one to come and point a finger that I awarded myself a contract. To start with, I was never in any position, that would award contracts, or any portfolio, that gave out contracts to any of our companies. Yeah, so clearly, I think I was away from all those areas which could have gotten my hands soiled, even by perception. So whatever property I have as a person is something that I can defend fairly, having worked for them with traceable incomes, especially that most of the contracts that we're involved with were government contracts, so that all that money can be traced somehow. And as to whether any of our companies got money without delivering, those are contractual issues which can be looked at, and the directors of the companies that have interest in are competent to respond as to why, if at all. I don't think that happens under because of the way the contracts are designed. But in the event that there's that allegation, somebody should be able to respond clearly what the true position is, and it doesn't affect me in any way, because like I said, from 2017, really, I have not been active in any of the companies. I've been more in the political side and watching from afar. Yes, firstly, when you look at President Michael Sata himself, President Michael Sata believed in the One Zambia, One Nation. He believed in growing a party, based on patriotism. That is why, even when he may have had differences with politicians like my dear sister Dora Sidia, who was in MMD and opposed the Sata policies at the time, when he came into power, they were able to reconcile, and he brought her into MMD. I believe people like Sylvia Masewa and the rest of them. President Michael Sata, he knew that politics is a game of numbers. If you were to limit yourself to the people that you started with, then the party would not grow. I've talked to my friends, those that project the message of True Green, and I've been very honest with them. I've said to them, the moment you succeed on that path, you will kill the party. Why will you kill the party? Because any and every politician has ambition and would like to aspire for one position or the other. But if you make it as a rule or as a norm under the PF that certain positions are only reserved for the True Greens, then you keep new members away. How then do you hope to grow the party? Because President Sata himself, he brought in new people and even gave them positions to demonstrate that to be able to grow a party, you need new members coming in, joining, and having equal opportunities like the old members. After all, the Constitution itself does not segregate or discriminate as to who can aspire for which positions. It gives some guidelines, and for as long as somebody qualifies, it does not go as far as looking at who was there when and so on and so forth. Yeah. So basically, I think that now when you look at the violence, as it were, yes, during the time that President Sata died, and there was competition, to ascend to a PF presidency, and I think arising from those differences, they took a little longer, to heal. In that people had gone into different camps from 2015 onwards. And if you remember, a year later we had gone back to another election. For me, I think that it was during that time that some of these factions arose, and somehow the incidences of violence began to brew. And we simply lost control of our cadres in terms of violence. But to say President Lungu and his cabinet departed from the pro-poor may be inaccurate, in that whilst there was violence, President Lungu's government continued to implement pro-poor policies. His government continued to build health posts in far-flung areas. He continued to build feeder roads to help farmers distribute farming inputs and also take their crops to the market. He continued to build communication towers right across the country in various remote areas, because this was the promise that was given, to say decisions will not be based on economic considerations but social considerations. Even if it was felt a communication tower will not be sitting properly economically in some area called Njalamimba in Mporokoso. Under the PF, we believed with time that area, given the potential, will be able to turn into an economic area. Because if you don't do that, then there would have been very few communication towers centered around the CBD. In our case, with pro-poor policies and social considerations, we took them to all parts of the country. No, you see, when I say I'm a background strategist, it's not in absolute terms. You know that the last 1 year, if I was to speak, the last 1 year since we lost elections, I've been there. I'm in the battlefront. Any politician, any of our members that is picked up by the police, I'm the first one at the police station. I mean, evidence is there to show. Be it at the courts. I've been there to fight for all the members of parliament. When there were petitions in court, I handled 350 petitions countrywide. Members of parliament, council chairpersons, mayors and councillors. I chaired a committee for petitions. And I'm proud to mention to you that we only lost 9. The 340 plus were saved. So I was never in the background, The background strategist is how I started. Yeah, I mean, in Parliament, I lead colleagues, to lead the protests. I'm not in the back. I'm in front. I'm the one to be called behind the bar and be reminded. Yeah, I'm on radio. I come to a TV station. So, at the time when maybe other spectators, other commentators, and members felt that the PF would not emerge, won't even last for 3 months, I was there speaking for the PF. You remember, there was a time that people believed, within 6 months, PF would be dead. I was one of those that was always present and fought the battles to the hilt. So for those that may feel laid back, and it may not be entirely true, because I have been there. Yes, I may not be as vocal, like I said. It's a strategy also. I mean, the young voter out there may not need me to speak every time, even when there's nothing to talk about. Okay? If it is in Parliament, what is my role as leader of opposition? People maybe may pick an example from Jack Mwimbu. He was leader of opposition. He was speaking all the time. That was his style. The position of leader of opposition is provided for in the Constitution and in the privileges. One of the things that I have to do is to provide alternative policy. Simply put, meaning you're holding a high position equivalent to a prime minister in opposition. So clearly, even my actions, the demeanor, my disposition, It should be slightly different. Yes, aggressive, but be able to put a point across. There's a lot of work that I do as leader of opposition, working with leader of government business, who's the vice president, the government chief whip. Parliament sometimes is only known for what we see during the plenary session. But there's a lot of work that goes on in committee, a lot of work that goes on in between the presiding officers, that is not on camera. So it's a full-time job. I report in the morning, colleagues come and join in the afternoon. So in as much as there may not be as much drama on the floor of the House, there's a lot of work that is done to try and influence certain decisions, persuade maybe the executive on certain bills, and if there's a motion, for instance, coming from the opposition, sit down with the minister concerned and see how we can ameliorate, how we can find a common ground, or agree to disagree and go and slug it out on the floor. Yeah, so I have been there. I have not. If you took the last 1 year, how many voices have been there speaking for the party? I'm sure my voice will be among the top 3. Maybe I'll take a minute to just respond to the last part of the earlier question, where people felt I was sponsored and the President Lungu is the one behind my candidature, and that I'm just there to warm the seat, and that at an appropriate time. That's politics made simple. Really, there's no politics like that. There can never be anything like that. Firstly, the Constitution provides for how one ascends to party presidency. If Brian Mundubile became president of the party today, and for some reason he wants to leave the seat for another person, what the Constitution provides is there should be another convention. Simple and straightforward. Yeah, so it can be transferred like a chiefdom, where you say, okay, now it's him to be there. No. So that is not true. And those that are using that, of course, are merely trying to use that to try and disadvantage my campaign. I mean, I'm my own man. I've shown that. I am my own man, in as much as I have a different approach towards politics, but I'm my own man, and I don't think that President Lungu himself would want to do that. He was asked recently on his birthday, it's just that it was not in camera, and he said, can I be such an idiot? Those are the words that he used. Can I be such an idiot? Just to put somebody there and say, be there for me. And he said, no, there's no truth in that. Yeah, so for those that may doubt, they should hear it from me. Firstly, by our constitution, it's not possible that Brian Mundubile can be elected president today and tomorrow he gives it to somebody else. It's not possible. It cannot be done. If the elected president steps down, you have to go to a convention. If that were possible, what they're suggesting was possible, President Lungu now would have said, I'm president for the next 4 years. So I've just shifted it to another, no need for a convention. So he can't do that now because the Constitution doesn't allow. Yet he was elected as president. He can't transfer. He can appoint an acting president waiting for the convention, but he can't transfer that presidency to somebody else. So how then can Brian Mundubile come and transfer that presidency back to President Lungu? Remember that we are going to a convention now because President Lungu wants to leave the stage. Yeah. So the example I was giving is that for those that are saying President Brian Mundubile is just warming it up for President Lungu, if that were to be the case, then maybe even the convention would not have been there. Okay, we're going to a convention now because President Lungu is cutting short his presidency. Remember, he was only elected last year. Okay, he's cutting short his presidency. That's why we're going for a convention. Otherwise, he would have simply said, no need for a convention, I'm here. Because I'm the president of the party. I was elected last year, and I go on until 2026. Maybe immediately before the elections, then there will be another convention. So the fact that he has allowed the convention to go, he's confirming that he's cutting his presidency short. So that particular assertion is actually misguided, because the person that is alleging, I want to transfer the presidency to, is the one who is cutting short his presidency for us to go to the convention. What I bring to the table, I bring a tested and approved leadership. I also bring loyalty and commitment, both to the party and to the nation, having served as a member of Central Committee for some time until now, and also having served as a minister and government chief whip. So loyalty and commitment is what I demonstrated right across. And I also bring stable and mature leadership. These attributes accrue to me naturally. And this is what members and general citizens can attest to. Yeah, now, when you look at that in totality, you'll agree with me that if we take the structures of our party put together, it's the same structures we went with, and they voted massively in their numbers. Unfortunately, the number fell short of what was required to win an election. From there now, like I said earlier, the politics of yesterday and the politics of today must be different. I've been encouraging party structures now to say the 2015 elections should be very different from where we are going, because that time we're in power. We had presidency. We're just replacing a president after the demise of President Sata. So we really have to be careful. And what we have to look at now is that having lost an election just slightly over a year ago, what we need to carry the general voter along with us, besides the structures. It's an intra-party election, but we also must play by the ear, because the one who will be voted as president at that convention is most likely going to be the presidential candidate in 2026. Meaning that we should have recourse to what people are saying, what the other voters are saying outside the party. If we became selfish and say, look, stay away, this is our party affair, and maybe somebody ascends to presidency and that individual does not appeal to the other voters, then we have a problem. So we can do two things at the same time. The delegates who are going to the convention are coming there in their representative capacity. So we'll do well with the delegates, first of all, to play by the ear, listen to what the people, even outside, popularly known as the 1 million. The 1.8 are intact, because with the 1.8, whether it's CK, GBM, BM, CC, whoever is voted as president, that 1.8 million is guaranteed, because that is a vote, quote unquote, for the party, so to speak. Now, if we want to go to 3 million, for instance, we need to get another 1.2 from outside. So at what point do we engage the 1.2? The time to engage the 1.2 is now. We need to move with them. We need to say, okay, what do you think? We are going for the convention, but who do you think? Because now that we've put ourselves out as leaders, I want to respond to one specific question where you say the others may have national character and so on. It's the first time I'm vying for position of party president. Previously, I campaigned in Port and I campaigned very well, because that was the jurisdiction within which I wanted to stand. Others in this race have been on a presidential race before, meaning they went to Chavuma to present themselves as a candidate for the party, for the nation. Obviously, you at one point or the other expect them to be well known than myself. Now, being known, has two faces. What are you known for? you know what I mean. I mean, we know some people with very bad records. Sorry to use this word. Notorious criminals are known everywhere. So, never Joe, you know what I mean. So Joe can say, I'm known everywhere, therefore I'm better than you. So if someone is well known, you must go to the next step. What are they known for? Yeah, but I believe that as the campaigns open, we will begin to go to the people everywhere in all the provinces to market our candidature. And I believe that during that time, for those that may not have known me, will have an opportunity to interact with me and then do a fair assessment as to how strong a candidate I will be should I be given a chance. Well, given the background about myself, it all goes to show that my type of leadership would be one that is inclined or skewed towards the poor. And that's basically what it is. I served as Minister of the Province, Northern Province, for 3 years. If you look at the efforts that I made in the province, it actually shapes what kind of leadership you expect to see in me if I was given a higher position. Yeah, so yes, you've agreed with me now that the politics are very dynamic. Just the examples that you've given, you struggle to draw a golden thread in really what is happening, meaning that circumstances are determined according to a particular geographical area and at the time, values and the culture in that particular environment. For instance, in Kenya, who ever thought the Kenyan political space would abandon the lineage of the elite to go to a hustler, okay? Because with time, people have learnt a lot, and sometimes people believe, can we associate with our own? And I think this is where we were with President Michael Sata when PF took over. My sincere belief, and I'm saying this, with an open mind, my sincere belief is that the journey that was started by PF in 2011 is a journey that we need to continue on. And the reason is simple. Whoever wants to save Zambia must look at their client. Who's their client? Their client are the poor Zambians, because they're in majority. And if at all politics is a game of numbers and the game of the majority, we must immediately look at addressing the challenges of the poor. So my governance will revolve around uplifting the interests or the living standards of the poor people. And that is just a starting point. I would not want to even massage the message maybe towards the mining houses to say this is where our interests will be. Whilst we appreciate their investment must speak directly to uplifting the living standards of the poor people. The two cannot be separated. If they're going to promise that the investment will improve the economy, we need to be very practical. I don't agree with what we have today, that we must give concessions, 3.2 billion per year, and in the next 10 years, the mines would have picked up in terms of production to 3 million tons per year. That's a very loose commitment, There is no law, that will compel those mining houses, for instance, to do that. Or if they don't do that, there's no punishment whatsoever. So how do you give away concessions and lose so much money for a promissory note? There we have a problem. Yeah, and yet the problems of the poor are immediate. If you go to the Copper Belt now, one, the UPND government then said they had Plan B, that alternative plan to Mupani and KCM. And the miners on the Copper Belt voted for the UPND because they said, wow, I think President Church has got a plan for us. It's been over a year. In the budget speech, there is no mention of KCM and Mupani, meaning that there was no plan at all for these people. And the sufferings of the people on the Copper Belt, I'm always there. You would feel very sad for an economy, the local economy of the Copper Belt, that was so vibrant. Previously, we were looking at economies in other provinces because the Copper Belt, quote unquote, was sorted to a great extent. Why? Because the contractors and suppliers were busy. They in turn employed people. So the economy was just vibrant. But what you get today, is a very sad story. And I'm indeed hoping that again, we will not see corruption in form of policy, legislation, and administration, where maybe our leaders will take backroom deals and come up with policies, come up with legislation that will put private interest over public interest. Because those are some of the risky areas where you get that sort of corruption. And yet you'll be running after a different type of corruption when the real corruption, is left unabated. Because 3.2 billion kwacha loss in revenue because you made a policy that allowed mineral tax to be deductible. For me, I think is unforgivable, even up to this end.
Brian will agree that the dynamics of politics, the economies, and the needs have changed. The PF was voted in 2011 promising low taxes, more jobs, and more money in people's pockets. Would-be leaders come up with all slogans like, quote, "Let's make America great," end of quote, quote, "Yes, we can, it can be," end of quote, saying, quote, "I will make you millionaires," end of quote. What is Brian Mundubile's slogan and campaign from the PF manifesto into the Zambian picture?
Costa was brought to you by FQM Trident Limited, a subsidiary of First Quantum Minerals Limited.
It's easy when you do it like this.
So fresh when you do it like that.
More fun when you do it like this. But even better when you use aloha.
It's clean when you do it like this.
Looks good when you do it like that.
So much fun when you do it like this.
But even better when you use aloha.